quick introduction to kW-Field. This software application was designed for professionals conducting commercial and industrial energy audits. And it's really built from the perspective of an engineer walking through that building with any level of information, whether in advance you have detailed plans of the facility and historical consumption, or whether you're really starting from scratch. And it's intended to be used on a touchscreen computer. So really, as we walk through this, try to think about it from the perspective of being able to walk through that building, inputting information with a finger or a stylus on a touchscreen as you go. The way that this is laid out is that you have clients and you have projects for those clients. And a project can be a single building. It can be a targeted study of some individual pieces of equipment within that building. Or it could be a summary of an entire campus and all the different buildings and floors and rooms and assets in those, or as we call them, components. Now, when I jump into one of these projects, hitting go down here in the bottom right of the screen, you'll see the way that we laid out the application. Within each project, I have buildings. In this case, it's a town, so we'd have our town hall and our school and fire station and so on. And within each building, you have areas. Those are typically going to be your floors. You can use them more flexibly. And within each area, you'll have spaces, typically just the rooms on those floors. And within each space, you'll have components. Now, what a component is in kW-Field is anything that you're going to care about that resides within an individual space or room for the purposes of that study. And so a component can be anything from a boiler or chiller or lighting system through controls, water consumption, electrical service, pretty much you name it. Now, stepping back, you first go and add a building in the application. I'll do that right now. So we said that this is a K through 12 school, so maybe we'll call this a preschool. So we can go find the proper icon for that if we just want. And when you create that building, the application will walk you through a number of high-level questions about the facility. This is roughly the equivalent of an ASHRAE Level 1 energy audit. It's meant to give you a basic understanding of the type of construction, bearing wall, masonry, condition of thermal envelope that goes down to the doors and windows and seals, the different interior finishes, equipment systems, operating voltages, types of heating and cooling equipment, even your day of audit conditions. And it really walks the user through what they're looking for that particular type of assessment. Over on the right, you'll see you can also take down things like schedules of operation. And you can do that very specifically or very generally. So to be general, you might say, I believe this facility is in use about 2,500 hours per year. And maybe that's enough for the type of assessment you're doing. Alternatively, you might want to set up a time of day schedule that varies by time of year. So we'll take that town hall schedule, make a copy of it, and we'll break up the year into different segments because this is an educational facility. It'll probably be off in the summer, so we'll say that it goes from the beginning of the year until May. We'll add another date range from there until September, and then another one for the end of the year. In September, or in the summer rather, we'll just cancel out all those days that aren't individually relevant. And then as you work through that facility, you'll find that you'll have a series of schedules to apply to specific parts of the facility, particular pieces of equipment, and those automatically update as you go. So you're not going back to a spreadsheet or your notes after the fact, trying to figure out where a change is relevant. You can also take site photos using the built-in camera. Now, because I'm on a laptop here, this is going to take a picture of me rather than what I'm looking at. Hi, everybody. And if you take a picture like this, we let you do a couple other neat things. First off, you can actually edit that picture in the field as you go. So you can annotate right on top of that image here. Zoom out so we can see me. And you can insert standard shapes or just draw freehand on top of that as you go. So if I wanted to point out something on there, or if I wanted to draw some free shapes and things like that for rooms, whatever it might be, you can even just draw or write freehand on top of it. And when you save that, it automatically ties itself to the specific part of the application you're in. In this case, the preschool is selected at the time that I recorded it. So now I have one photo that's specifically tied to that preschool. Now, if I had an image on my desktop, like a floor plan, like this one, I can bring that image in, and I can edit it as well. So I can take my floor plan and say, well, I'm over here in this part of the building, so I'll crop down to there, zoom in, and maybe what I'm talking about is over in this corner right here. Or like I did for this, you can actually start a diagram from scratch. So what I did was I just drew my very messy little town just freehand on top of a little digital whiteboard. And I reused that for each of the buildings as I went. Okay, so we walk into our preschool and we go to our first floor. So I'll add a first floor here by hitting plus area in the top right. And for that floor, you can record comfort conditions and different types of construction and so on. Or if you want, you can just jump straight into adding your individual rooms. So we walk into our first room, and maybe it's not an office. Let's say it's a mechanical room. So we'll add a mechanical room. Within that mechanical room, let's start by adding the lighting. So I'll hit plus component, go to lighting in the top left corner here. What type of lighting is it? Let's say it's some T12 34 watts magnetic ballast linear fluorescent lamps. So I go over to linear lighting. There's my T12s. And we did this for all types of equipment, where in 3 clicks you can get to pretty much any type of equipment and how it's being used in this facility. So I have 12 fixtures in this room, and I have 34-watt lamps, and I have 4 lamps per fixture. We actually built in device codes as well. So if I wanted to use this code, I could actually just put in F34-watt, 4-foot, 4 lamp, select my ballast and lamp combination. It will automatically fill in this information down to my rated fixture wattage. I can go and change my schedule of use for these individual lamps. Maybe they're not in use much because it's a mechanical room, say only about 500 hours per year. And if I had something to say about them that doesn't fit well into a question, I can take a picture, I can draw it, I can also record. And I can even, if I click out of this, record information in the background, which is automatically being tied to these particular lights, at the same time as I'm going through and answering individual questions about them. I can also take written notes, either using good old-fashioned handwriting recognition on a touch screen, using a keyboard, like I have to now because I'm using my laptop, or we also work with some speech recognition applications like Dragon Speak. So you can just speak through your notes in the field and have those automatically transcribed to text. The little exclamation point down here in the bottom right refers to all these red exclamation points you're seeing on the screen. What these mean are, I'm not done here yet. And if I was finished with these lights, I can just click here to mark those off as complete, switches over to a summary of all the information that's been input about them, and then I walk into my next room. Or maybe before I leave, I'll want to add something else to this mechanical room. Let's say it's a boiler. Well, if I click on heating sources down here, down at the bottom of the screen, I have a hot list of all of the equipment that I found at least once in this project. And if I had previously found a boiler that was kind of like the one I'm looking at, I can just drop in that previous configuration here, this HB Smith, and then amend anything that's different about it. So if it actually wasn't made in 1975, we'll say it was made in 1987 instead. And then I can get into all of my other specifics. And as you're adding equipment, what we've done is we've started with the general information, things you can read off of the nameplate or see by looking at something. And then we get into greater and greater specifications, into power consumption, into operations and maintenance considerations and qualitative assessments of condition, down to individual performance tests that I might conduct while on site. So we walk into our next room. We'll say it's the hallway outside of that mechanical room. So we'll add a hallway here. And it's also very easy to copy and paste equipment as you see repetition. So I can go back to my mechanical room and say, hey, I've got those same lights. So I'll just drag them over into my hallway. I'll copy those. And I'll say, but in this case, I only have 5 fixtures. I can go back through and change any of my specifications. Or I can just say, that's good enough for me, right? So in this way, you can walk through populating buildings in record time. And these questions allow you to really let people who don't have that same level of expertise, who aren't 20-year professional engineers, to guide that process of gathering data because they have software that really asks them the right questions to ask. You can keep track of different opportunities you see to install variable frequency drives or occupancy sensors. And you can do that scoping on the fly. So if I wanted to replace these T12s in the room I was just in, I can just drag those into this measure. it will keep track for me of all the places I thought that was relevant. You can map out complex systems in buildings, whether it's systems of meters or cooling or heating, and the different zones that they service and how those are defined. Maybe this zone includes this hallway as well. And when I'm done in the field, click Home. And if I'm working with colleagues on site, you can actually, with kW-Field, have 2, 5, 10, 20 different engineers working on separate pieces of equipment. At the end of the day, they can merge all of that together automatically into one clean project file. So even if you weren't the person who went through that building, you still have all of the information in a sortable, mineable way about that building. And if I go and generate a report here, what you'll get is a series of files like these. So I'll have one which is kind of a benchmarking file about that facility. If I enable my macros, and close these two documents I had open, then I can walk through every category of equipment, lighting, heating, cooling, which is automatically populated with all the equipment I've found in that facility, and basic consumption metrics. This is kind of a benchmarking spreadsheet. So for each individual lighting fixture, I know the building, the floor, the room, my name, my technology and how it's being used, my basic consumption metrics. We even, in the case of lighting, will fill in everything over through kW, kWh, based on hours of use. And if you throw in a blended utility rate, I can get an idea as soon as I walk out of that building of what they use for fluorescent lighting. And these are very sortable spreadsheets. So if I wanted to go over and say, well, let's only look at T12 lighting, if that's what I was focused on earlier. And I only want to look at rooms where I've got a lot of these fixtures on, because maybe I'm looking at occupancy sensors. So I'll ignore all of the rooms with 1 or 2 or 3 fixtures. And maybe I'm only going to look at this in building 4. In this way, you can dive through all of your information to get to just what you're looking for really quick. Whether that's only motors that are greater than 1 horsepower and don't have a variable frequency drive and run a certain number of hours per year or more, or whether you just want to see every chiller and the combined cooling load in the building. And if you put in things in a variety of different units, we'll actually give you that standardized in one here. In this case, BTU per hour was what was chosen. The other neat thing is that everything in this sheet is linked up. And what I mean by that is if I click on this building, building 4, or if I wanted to go see building 1, in all of these cases, what I can do is I can actually launch a document, a website, an HTML file, about that building. So here's the site photos that I took. Here's the audio that I recorded while I was in the field about that building. Turn up my... If I have a schedule of use for the building, in this case I said it was always in use, there's my 8760 hours. Any questions I answered about it, any written notes, constructed in 1953, major renovation, and then a breakdown of all of the different types of areas and spaces and individual components within that facility automatically populates for me. And I can walk back through that building, building by building, the campus, building by building, floor by floor. So here's my first floor plan. There's some photos that I reused there. Room by room, so here's my office 2, or my mechanical room, down to each individual asset and what I know about it. And this is not only a really helpful engineering tool to be able to go back through and find all the specifications, but also a great presentation piece to your customer. And we generate some other types of reports as well that can be really helpful. Things like specialized spreadsheets that summarize, in this case, air handlers. So this is just the legend or the key for this. What it will do is it will summarize all of my different air handlers in that building, my where they're located, locations served, fans, pumps, coils, dampers, filters, motor measurements, and different airflows and things like that. So the goal for us is to give you mineable, useful information as soon as you walk out of that building, so that you as an energy auditor spend your time analyzing opportunities for your clients rather than digging for information.